and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not reflect the views of BronxNet, the KittyRose lifestyle, or the program underwriters. This is the movement. The movement. One thing you know now that you wish you knew at 21.
But as I said before, for me, is to have the confidence. Teenager is difficult. I remember. I think that's why I say I wish I had the confidence because I think that I was a teenager until my 30s.
Okay.
And I think being a teenager, like all of us, is a very difficult phase. And some are hesitant, some experiment a little bit, and some of them they just push the envelope all the way. And we learn in different ways how to be confident and bold. For me, it took a long time. There is something in the play that says the super says my biggest fear is to be insignificant, and I live that fear every day. Well, that I lived that for many years.
What is the lesson you wish you knew?
God, there's so many of them.
Okay.
I think the one that I can harken back to the most is that growing up, I wish I was more present
What do you
and
mean?
aware of who I was and the surroundings that I grew up in. You know, I often would I would, daydream a lot. You know, about what it was like to do this or what it was like to do that. And so I felt like that took me out of reality for a good reason, because sometimes growing up, South Side Chicago,
No, I don't know.
rough areas,
Right. Okay.
yeah, for me that was that.
Okay.
The harsh realities of your environment sometimes affect you greatly. So I
Okay.
was checked out that way.
Okay.
But I also felt like, I wasn't as present and aware about who I was as an individual, as opposed to being always looking behind my back and, trying to figure out what was going on around me. So it's like an awareness and a presence of self.
Okay.
That I felt like if I had to go back, I would really be more present and self-aware about what it is and who I was and what it is I wanted to do.
When do you think you got that light bulb moment to kind of figure out and say, you know what, things are passing me by, I need to be more present?
I would say probably right after I got out of service.
Okay.
And then I went to college.
So how old were you then around?
I guess it was in like 23, 24.
Okay.
That was a real defining moment for me, because I didn't know anything about you're so sheltered sometimes that, and your parents are my parents were high school educated, but they were from Puerto Rico. They spoke English, but Spanish was the first language. So they didn't really understand or could guide me in any kind of way in terms of college or what that is.
Okay.
I had to learn about that on my own. So oftentimes in the neighborhood, oftentimes, at least back then, probably still is true today, the way out was through the military. You get out to see the world, you explore things, you find things, you're taken care of, you're making a little money, So to me, that was the way out. But when I got out of that, it was like, what do I do now?
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? And so I said, okay, well, let me try this thing called college, and so I walked up and down Chicago until I found one. I just walked into one.
Really?
I didn't look,
Okay.
I didn't know that there were other colleges like NYU
Okay.
or UCLA
Okay.
or, there was no like actual, or that I could even go there, or
Okay.
could even think or imagine of going to a place like that, so I just went into the first one I saw.
Okay.
And then I feel like that saved me, because then I was like, okay, I got into a place where, I could continue to refine learning and reading and note taking and math and all that, because Chicago Public Schools weren't pretty much probably like New York schools aren't the best in terms of like, you know, how you hold and take in your education, you know. So I kind of had to repeat stuff,
Okay.
you know.
So when you finally gain the confidence to be secure in Hyman to say, I can do anything.
I don't know, maybe a couple of years ago.
Wow. But that's real talk. Yeah.
That's true. I'm not joking.
I believe
that's
you. No,
true.
I
That's
believe
what
you.
I
So
agree.
then how does this lack of knowing,
Yeah.
lack of confidence, and it's funny because maybe that's what led you to the arts, because the art, they say, is what is the revolution, they say, of the on the human level of change, you know, where if you're not in politics or you're not in the traditional types of jobs, then you're in the arts because you use that outlet as an expressive way of wanting to create change or be about change. So even having this lack of, well, I'm not necessarily on the forefront, or the lack of not really knowing so that I can be present, how did the arts play a part in all of that? How did, you know, you start writing or directing or acting? How did you start, like, you told me you were a poet.
He has been in the arts longer than me, so start with
Okay, like how does the arts play a part in that?
I mean, I think I'll try and be as brief as possible. I think the way the arts, I think you hit it on the nose. I think it opens up your sense of who you are 1st. I think it also, and there's a revolution in that in itself, is discovering who you are as a person. Okay, and once you discover who you are as a person, you have a tendency to keep discovering who you are as a person. And so the arts open that door. They open that door to language. They open that door to
So did that
music.
happen in college?
That to me happened definitely in college. I mean, the interest in theater for me happened in high school, but it was you know, again, my situation's a little
Right, because
different.
even though it might have started where you got introduced in high school, you still went off, went into the military, went to college.
Exactly.
So it
I
took a
didn't
minute
feel like
to come.
I had an opportunity to do the arts.
Okay.
So that's why I went off to where I went off to.
Okay.
I didn't feel like I had that opportunity, but it was always something that triggered a feeling in me. Seeing a production in high school, saying, "Wow, you need to explore this. You need to explore this," and it was always nagging on the back of my head. And so finally, when I did all of that, I said, "You know, let me go into college and see what's up with theater."
Okay.
You know, and that's how I started to explore. But it is about discovering who you are, and the arts do that. They also teach you that in the arts, you also become an independent individual thinker. You know, and that whether it's expressively through who you are, like with drawing or theater or language, you have to think through certain situations in order to express certain situations. And so the arts also teach you that, and that's really one of the things that I wish wouldn't be taken out of curriculums, because that's one of the first things that goes.
Right.
Is the arts.
And the part that you play, or one of the parts, because I'm sure you play other parts, but as a director, helping someone or helping an actor reach their potential with their part.
Yes.
So, are you also an actor?
Yes.
So, how, as an actor, then director, do you pull out? Is it also because you're a parent as well? Like, how are you able to? Because I think one of the reasons why I mentioned the stage manager is because she was a woman, right?
Of course.
And I'm a woman stage manager,
Right.
And one of the things that she joked about, and we took a picture with her hat on, because I'm told, you know, I get told so much by people who hire me that the team always thinks I'm mean and I'm hard and I'm a bitch, and I'm like, what do you mean? I'm doing my job. I don't even understand how you're even getting personal with me. I'm just like this, I'm working. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So how do you, as a director, how are you able to get the actor to get to the meat?
I think I always tell actors and us and students the same thing, that you can't be an amazing actor if you don't know who you are.
Okay.
That's number
one.
one.
I saw in the TV show the other day that actors are supposed to have no personalities.
I think that's contrary. I don't know what show you saw.
Okay.
But that's not my belief.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
Okay. Because you have to play so many parts.
so you don't necessarily have your own.
I think you have to know who you are to play other parts, and then you bring your own self to those parts. For me, my goal as a director and learning as an actor is that honesty is the first thing that you need to approach in any story. You know, you have to approach in these stories conflicts and resolutions all the time. So if you don't know and who you are, and you don't have the confidence in yourself, how can you do that? You know, if you can't do it for yourself, how are you going to do it for another role?
Because people will continue to live in their roles.
Well, that's true too. But at the same time, you know, it's very important in a story like this, or in other plays, and whether they're musicals, that there's a sense of honesty with who you are as the actor, so that what I feel and believe, and people will disagree, is that you put yourself in that situation,
Right.
and then there's honesty that evolves out of that in terms of the story that you're trying to tell. As a director, I'm responsible for all of it. I'm direct for that, responsible for making sure that the story is told clear and that the story is in line with what the writer wrote, you know, and to also give you a vision of how I see this play. You know, so give the actor a vision of how I see this play. Give the stage manager, even stage managers, have to be artistically, they have to have an artistic eye, because they also have to call a show.
Right.
There's timing.
Right.
They have to understand the vision that I put on this, so that the entire play or that message gets conveyed to the audience.
So when you have your story on paper, how different is it from when you first wrote it on paper
Oh my God! You
to
got that question. Yeah.
where it's at now? When you get the stage manager's input, you get the director's input, and then it looks like you guys included the actor's input to the direction a little
Always,
bit. So
yeah.
how did the story go from the black and white paper? How does it look now in comparison to when you first brought it to them?
It's not much different.
Okay.
I'm happy that I got Eddie. You know, he's extremely talented. Extremely talented. So
Does that happen? Does it happen where directors end up changing the writing? Okay.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay.
It does. It definitely does.
but my dialogue is the same. I'm very protective of my dialogue. He has never challenged my dialogue. The story is the same. He hasn't touched it. We had a difference on one
Yeah.
thing, and I deferred to him because of his experience. And it had nothing to do with the writing. It was an artistic choice.
Was that the backwards
Choice?
scene?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
all
of
right.
course,
Yeah, and that was fine. I respect. You see, I'm a political person, but I'm also an organizer.
Okay.
And I always believe that there is a point in which we need to centralize power. And he's the director, and sometimes you can have differences, but there has to be a decision maker. And I did my part. I wrote it. My dialogue is there, is intact. Nobody messed with that. Then we will have problems.
And
But-
Juan said that. Juan said that you had a very clear cut.
Yeah.
That the writing was very clear. The message
That's
was
in
very.
effort, and I know that you cannot have everything you want, not even in theater, but in life. There has to be a give and take, and sometimes you need to trust people, especially in areas where you are new. I'm new, and I have no problem in trusting Eddie, and that was the only thing.
Why did it take a year and a half?
I think if you want to talk about
Life,
this,
okay.
no, I think no, it's not just. I mean, we all busy,
Right.
You know, the thing too is you got to find the right actors for the right
Okay.
roles. That
Okay.
takes time.
Okay.
Victoria, who is someone I don't know if you've met Victoria or not, was also a
Is that
casting
Columbia?
director. No, Victoria is the person.
The lighting?
No, Victoria is a person who had been with this for a long time.
Okay.
She's more like an associate producer, but she
Okay.
was the casting
Okay.
director. And she still is directly involved in it, but you know, working with her for, I mean, it was about a year and a half, right? It was about a year and a half, and it was.
I started before that. I started
Yeah.
like a year before. It's for me
Okay.
2 years and a half.
So in you starting, because that's really the story I wanted to get to, in the 2 years, you know, how long did it take you? Because you still have a full-time job, I'm assuming. You still work.
Yeah.
You're still someone's husband, and you're still two people's father. So within life, how long did it even take you to write 5 sessions?
2 years.
It took you 2 years to write 5
here and
sessions.
here and there, and even to the end, I was adding. This week we're adding
We're adding another thing to it.
Okay.
one new line. I mean, I just I don't want to say it, but I discovered something that I should have discovered a long time ago in the dialogue, and I said, I could have made this little twist here, and it will make that scene even more interesting. And so we're adding it tomorrow.
How does you being so involved or so wanting to be involved in change or awareness in your community, how does that affect you as a dad, as a father? Like, I know sometimes I think my kids, they're very like supportive, but it becomes annoying also. And then not only does it become annoying, they're growing up in a different time, even though it's the same time, and they don't really feel like the issues that we fight for should be issues that we're still fighting for. So how has that interfered, or has it interfered, or do your children just not like mine, and they're just they're just all on board? Whatever you do, Dad, like, how has that played a part?
They are both really very politically aware, because in this home, that's what we talk about. We see the books and all that. So,
but do you think, from what you can say, because you can't really speak for them, from what you think do
No.
you think it's a bit, maybe too much, overwhelming at times? Like, can we just, be kids?
No, they're kids, and they do what they want to do. It's part of the day-to-day living that you incorporate values. You incorporate those values in your day-to-day living, and you keep doing the same thing. You can play a game, and you can bring those values into the game. You can bring those values in the school. You can bring those values into you treat people. And we're very humanistic here. At the same time, they're both very artistic. My older daughter is an artist. She paints. She grew up painting. She didn't take classes. She's a filmmaker. She does all these different things. My younger one has done acting. She's very interested in that. She's very vocal. So,
but
they
the
have their
arts
own time.
the arts is a small part. You're like you said, you're an organizer. You're a political person. You come from the unions. You come from. You can say the arts because it's like the underdog.
No, that's what I'm saying is that's what they grew up with.
Right, but they grew up with. Sure, you doing protests and marches and.
No, I didn't mean it that way. What I meant is that it was something that they were born with.
Got you.
So
Okay.
those were talents that they were born
with.
And then those talents were developed in a family context, in a neighborhood context, and then they easily applied them to where they live.
Do you think that they ever had problems or have problems being mixed kids? Because they're the. Has anyone ever said, because they don't necessarily look Spanish, they look white. So do you think they've had any challenges?
Yeah, they have had challenges. And that's basically a question that is better for them to answer.
Okay.
Than me.
Well, when they come home and crying about
information from both of us.
No, what do their father say?
Well, what basically tell them is this is the reality. You're a mixed race. This is the reality. This country has always been, from the creation of this country, from its inception, a racist country. And I remember once they were in the YMCA and in Williamsburg, where we used to live, and they were to the swimming pool to learn to swim, and there were these Polish kids, and when they were younger, their skin was even whiter than now, and my kids and the Polish kids saw that they were not as white as everybody thought that they were. Their skin looked, and they when they were changing clothes, they were very little. They started making comments about that, and so we're talking about kids that sometimes you think, well, kids are naive, they're innocent, they don't think about race, but in their homes, racism was inculcated, and then they start saying things like that to them when they were changing, before they went to the. So they have experienced that, and the good thing about it is that it makes them more mature, and more aware of society
Okay.
and more socially conscious than kids that live in a
I
homogeneous
believe that. Yeah.
in a homogeneous home. If anything, I think that they benefited from that because they are stronger and they
Yeah.
understand both worlds very well. And I think that they don't need my help. If anything, I needed more help than,
And then
than they need.
I believe that. I
Yeah.
feel that. It's funny because I would ask you that question,
Yeah.
and I'm not saying that they haven't, but it's even weird that your kids would have a different type because they're mixed, but they're not the same kind of mix.
Right.
And it's funny because it still comes down to this black and white issue that we have in this world. You know, we even forget about everybody else in between. Matter of fact, saying that is wrong because there is no everybody else is in between
right.
because it's this big melting pot of all these different cultures. But I love that. I think you actually got a point there. They probably did do better off. You know, where you might think no, having that fear before you had them, like, oh my goodness, what obstacles are my children going to have? But actually, their obstacles strengthen them a lot more or fortify them
Yeah.
maybe than the kids that didn't have those obstacles. Because not only does it keep you aware, but it does fortify you because I think us not knowing is what fucks us up even more, you know, because then we stay in these stereotypes at 40 something years old without thinking that we're racist, but still make racist or racist comments.
Look, Obama, President Obama, mixed race. He looked African American. He could have looked white, but he looked African American. He was able to navigate and raised by white
Right,
family.
right.
So if anything, he just looked black, but he
Right.
was but he was able to navigate those difficult waters during his 8 years in terms of race.
Or even prior.
And a lot of African Americans criticizing him.
Going to Columbia.
Yeah.
No.
So, you know, but look how strong
Yes.
he was. And even when he was criticized, that he could have done more, etc., he was someone who knew who he was very well.
How was that in Chicago before that? Like obviously way before presidency. Like how were you in? Were you into politics growing up?
I mean, in Chicago, yeah. Chicago's a very union town.
Is it okay?
It's
So did you
also a
kinda
very
see
segregated town. It's a
Did you
problem.
know of his name?
Yes,
Okay,
definitely. Yeah,
okay.
saw him, met him as senator once.
Okay.
He was on several boards of foundations
Okay.
as well before all that happened.
Okay.
And you know, I'm originally from the South Side, so you know, he's out about the University of Chicago. You know, and so yeah, definitely. So
Okay.
Chicago's a very political town.
Were your
very political
parents
place.
political or were they?
No, my father had some. He followed politics, but not like I did.
So you got here at 25.
No, I was political when I was in Puerto Rico.
Were you?
Since I was
Okay.
very little. I was independentista, meaning that I wanted the independence of Puerto Rico from the United States, and I still do. One day I was watching a baseball game when I used to go to the baseball game in Puerto Rico, they raised the American flag and they raised the Puerto Rican flag. As a kid, I said, okay, that's normal. You know, that's normal. And then I saw a game, Cardinals versus with Josh Gibson was pitching. Bob Gibson was pitching against a Puerto Rican pitcher, Manuel Santiago. And I was a kid. And then before the game, they raised only the American flag in the United States. And then I said, well, we raised them here. Why they don't raise ours? So, you know, and that was my first political thought. So I saw through that game that something was wrong.
Wow.
And then that's why that put me into politics. And to this day, even when I live in the United States, I migrated like everybody migrates. People don't migrate because they want to leave their country. Working people migrate when there is economical crisis in their countries, and they follow the capital that has been extracted from their country.
Okay.
They don't do it consciously.
Okay.
They say, I'm following the capital that they
Right.
took from here.
They don't say it like that.
And they don't make an economical analysis
right.
of what is happening. But the reality is, the money is not here. The money is going over there. So that's
And
why.
follow the money.
And the United States has always been the one taking capital from the rest of the other countries in the world. So that's why you have people from China, from Singapore, from Latin America. because it has been the magnet of bringing all that money here, and it's by design. So once you have an economical understanding of how the world works, then you understand migration, you understand immigration. So it's not as simple as people think. If anything, people are following the money that was taken from their countries. You know?
This is the movement. The movement.